Hey everybody, this is Curtis Childs here for the 2018 Wisdom of the Near-Death Experience Symposium in Austin, Texas. And I'm lucky enough to be joined by Jeff Olsen. He's a speaker and best-selling author whose new book is entitled Knowing, Memoirs of a Journey Beyond the Veil and Choosing Joy After Tragic Loss. Jeff, thanks so much for being here. Would you just describe that book a little bit?
Oh, I would love to. And Curtis, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you for having me. Knowing just came out Valentine's Day, just a few days ago. And it is the compilation of the first two books. It's I Knew Their Hearts and Beyond Mile Marker 80 combined into one big cohesive story. I mean, I Knew Their Hearts was about the accident and the near-death experience and all the things that surrounded that. Beyond Mile Marker 80 was what you do after that. How do you put the pieces back together? How do you integrate back in life? How do you rebuild a life after having not only the NDE, but the bereavement and grief of losing half your family? It's about remarrying, adopting children, and all of that too. But now they're combined into one cohesive book that has deeper insights and extended chapters, and that's Knowing. And you can get that on Amazon. I'm very excited. It now comes in a hardcover book, so it's a library collector's edition. Of course, you can get paperback and all the ebooks as well. But there it is.
Well, it sounds amazing and such a cool thing to have all those experience and what you pulled out of it in one place like that. And
right,
so for everybody who isn't familiar with your first two books, I feel like your story, as I understand it, is so heartbreaking, but also so profound. Could you just give people a little context, tell us a little bit about the events that led up to your books?
Sure. Yeah, I had a horrific automobile accident, actually. It was 20 years ago now. So it's fun that on the 20th anniversary, we're releasing this compilation of the entire story. But the whole family was in the car, and it was a road trip. I was driving. My wife, Tamara, was sound asleep next to me, and yet still holding my hand. And our two young boys were in the back seat. Spencer was age 7, and Griffin was just a toddler, just 14 months old. What happened is I lost control of the car. I believe I dozed off for a second. I swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left, and the car began to roll, not off the road, but down the street at 75 miles an hour. I had the cruise control set. I blacked out for most of that. And when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. And the first thing I heard was Spencer, my 7-year-old, crying in the back seat. And as a father, of course, I wanted to get to him. I wanted to get to my son. And that's when I realized that I could not move. I was pinned either to the floorboard or the seat. I couldn't tell. I was struggling to breathe. I was struggling to see. I could feel myself losing consciousness. I was completely unaware of my injuries. What had actually happened is both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. The left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. My rib cage was damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had nearly been pulled off, and then the seatbelt had cut through me and ruptured all my intestines. In fact, it had tore open clear down through the hip, not to get graphic, but the femoral artery was actually exposed, and yet in some miraculous way not cut. But basically, I was in rough shape. I was wanting to get to my son. I heard him crying. That's when I realized no one else was crying. And that was the brutal reality, which I don't talk much about. But that's when I knew that both my toddler son, Griffin, who his car seat had come broken apart and he'd been thrown from the car, and Tamara, who was next to me, had suffered severe injuries, and they were both gone. I knew that they were already dead at the scene, and here I was losing consciousness. In fact, I recall attempting to speak to my hysterical 7-year-old son, and I managed to say, "It's going to be okay," which I thought that's such a lie. It's not okay. I mean, it was the worst hell a man could ever be in. And I set that circumstance just for contrast. So here I am in the darkest moment of my life, and suddenly I felt this light come. It's like light came rushing to me, almost like tangible light. It's as if it swirled around me and I was being comforted. And I seemed to rise above the scene of the accident. And I was a little bit surprised at what was happening. Suddenly I could breathe. The pain was gone. I was okay. And I thought, can I really be okay? And as I came to terms with that, I realized that Tamara, my wife, who I knew was deceased at the scene of the accident, she was there, and she was okay too. In fact, it was overwhelming to look at her and see that she was beautiful and gorgeous and okay and all was well. And I kept thinking, how can this be? And yet, even though she was okay, she was emphatic that I go back. She kept saying, no, 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 you can't be here. You can't be here. You've got to go back. And there I was in this beautiful light, feeling all this comfort and peace. And yet I knew I had a little boy sitting in the backseat of that car crying, and I made a choice. I was able to say goodbye to my wife and consciously come back into this realm, where I found myself moving effortlessly through a hospital, encountering the patients, the nurses, the doctors, a level 1 trauma center. And I have no concept of time. What actually happened is that people arrived on the scene. They got Spencer out of the car, my 7-year-old, who was not badly injured. I was a mess. They rushed us to a local hospital. They could do nothing for me in the local hospital, so they life flighted me into Salt Lake City to a level 1 trauma center. I had no idea. All I knew is I'd wrecked the car. I had said in this beautiful light the most profound goodbye I would ever say. And now I was moving about the hospital, seeing the doctors, patients, nurses, families of patients. But I was seeing them in such a profound way. I knew everything about them. I mean, I knew their love, their hate, their joy, their peace, their troubles, their lives. I mean, I felt them as if they were me. And there was this profound oneness that was undeniable. In fact, I just had this unconditional love for everyone and everything around me. And I felt as if I was them and they were me, until I finally came upon a body or a man laying on a bed that I didn't feel anything from. And I thought that was odd. So I stepped closer to look, only to realize, oh my goodness, that's me. Except I was me. I was having this profound experience, and that was my body, or what was the skin suit that I had worn in life. And it was in drastic shape. And that was the reality, that I am literally out of the body. And yet I knew I was to get back in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much in there that I find valuable. Your willingness to share both the intersection of sort of the larger experience out of the body and our life in the body, but then to tie that into your emotions as a father, you know, and being a father and husband myself. I just really appreciate you being willing to share that here, and then of course in the books.
Yeah, and of course that's a very short, condensed version. I mean, I expound on what I was feeling about people's lives. I mean, I felt the abuse as if it was my own, or I felt their excitement or their apprehension or their self-consciousness. There really was an undeniable oneness, which changed me forever. And that was, you know, that was just the beginning. I mean, as I looked at the body and knew I was to get back in, I didn't have to figure it out. I realized how powerful our conscious thought, our intention was. I'm getting back in the body, and boom. Then I was back in the body, but to all the pain, the grief, the guilt, the regret, the bereavement. And you know, I was ventilated. I had a big tube down my throat doing the breathing for me. And obviously my legs and right arm were immobile. My left arm, they eventually tied down because I kept pulling at everything. But I spent almost 5 months in the hospital. I had 18 surgeries in total, piecing me back together. But I had one foot in this realm and one foot in the next for months, and had profound experiences with the other side during that hospital stay. And maybe the most profound was at the very end of the hospital stay, which, you know, I only bring that up because I find it interesting that the two most profound experiences I had were at the scene of the accident, before any, you know, medications or narcotics could be administered. Now, obviously I was on morphine and a lot of, you know, heavy narcotics during my hospital stay. But at the end of my hospital stay was the other most profound. After I was off of all the narcotics, I was through with even the lower tab and was simply taking some Tylenol for pain in the shoulder they were attempting to repair.
It's fascinating. And so what will you be, what from all that you've gained there will you be presenting at the symposium this year?
Well, the symposium is wisdom from the near-death experience. And that's what I'm going to really touch on. Of course, I'll tell the story. People want to know the story in detail, and I'll go into far more detail about what happened and what took place and my insights and my peek into those other realms. But I want to focus on the wisdom from all of that, because the near-death experience is only as relevant as we implement it in our lives. And yet the years after that were difficult too. I mean, gosh, I had peeked into a place of unconditional love, and yet in this realm, where was all that love? Where was all that peace? Where was all that connection? And here I was, a one-legged man attempting to raise a son on my own. But the insights and the values and how we make every day a sacred day, and how we literally bring heaven, if you will, here. The homesickness I experienced, being homesick to go into those realms, and yet deciding, let's create heaven here. Let's make every day here a blessed, beautiful day, and really improve the way we live in this realm rather than longing for the other realms all the time.
Sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. And everyone who wants to take a look, check out neardeathwisdom.com for info on how to join Jeff, myself, and all the other speakers at the 2018 Wisdom of the Near-Death Experience Symposium. Jeff, thanks so much for taking some time to talk.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Curtis, and I can't wait to see you there and see all of you there. I look forward to Austin, Texas. It's a great town, and can't wait to rub shoulders with everyone. Thank you.